If I had to choose one thing to eat every day for the rest of my life, like realistically, that's not a situation I'm likely to be faced with, but if somebody said to me, you have to pick one thing that every day for the rest of your life you are going to eat, it would be this. There is not a question in my mind what I would choose. It's Khao Yam. It's somehow the only thing that I can imagine being impossible to get bored with. Every time you take a bite, you find something new, a new flavor, a new texture, some more brightness from something, a little coconut here, some fishiness here, and like, it just, you know, it's almost like you're tasting it for the first time as you're eating it, and then the next day you have it again, and you're tasting it for the first time again.
The attacks continue in the Deep South.
A standoff between separatists and the army. 32 separatists and 3 soldiers were killed.
Should I do the Gagan Anand? Should I lick my plate?
All right, so this is kind of a personal video, so I'm going to start with a personal story. On the day Daria and I moved into our house in Bangkok after a month of unsettled chaos leaving our home in China, when we finally had a chance to unpack our bags and pick up our dogs at the airport and begin to create something of a new home, we decided to celebrate by having dinner at a place called Sorn, which at the time was the top-rated restaurant in Thailand and number 2 in all of Asia. Now, I have mixed feelings on the entire genre of Michelin template fine dining, and I do think it tends to fall flat in particular when it showcases dishes meant to be spicy and intense, and Sorn is a southern Thai restaurant. And what really threw me was that their signature dish was a salad. Now, how much can you really elevate a salad? Then this plate came out, and one of the waiters stirred it all together, and if you close your eyes, this wasn't a salad at all. It was a bite of Southeast Asia. It almost felt like that Willy Wonka chewing gum that somehow managed to taste like a full 3-course dinner, except in this case, it was more like the entire culinary magic of one of the best places in the world somehow combined into one single bite. And this was a fine dining version. Imagine what the real thing must be like. That one dish is a big reason why about a month later, Daria and I flew down to Krabi and took a motorbike trip around a chunk of southern Thailand. I was on a quest for Khao Yam, and I would not be disappointed. I tell you all this because if you've never had this before, I know what probably goes through your mind when you see it in a video. It's the same place my mind went before that dinner at Sorn and that trip down to the south. It looks like a salad. It sounds like it's gonna be a salad. It's not a salad. It's a magic trick that somehow combines all of the notes of Southeast Asia into one miraculous dish. It's probably my favorite food.
สวัสดีค่ะนี่คือส่วนประกอบของข้าวยำนะคะข้าวยำร้านฉวางแม่อวยนะคะคือต้องมีข้าวคั่วมะพร้าวคั่วแล้วก็กุ้งแห้งแล้วก็พริกป่นแล้วก็ผักนี่จะต้องมีถั่วฝักยาวมีใบขมิ้นมีใบมะกรูดมีตะไคร้แล้วมาผสมกันแล้วก็จะออกมาเป็นแบบนี้แล้วก็ขาดไม่ได้คือมะม่วงแล้วก็ข้าวขาวหรือข้าวสีก็ได้แล้วก็น้ำบูดูข้าวยำนะคะพอผสมกันเสร็จมันก็จะออกมาเป็นแบบนี้แล้วก็เอาใส่น้ำลงไปราดน้ำนี้ลงไปนะคะให้หมดเลยน้ำซอสแล้วก็คลุกข้าวด้วยค่ะต้องมีช้อน
All right, to begin to understand Khao Yam, we have to first point out that no 2 restaurants or families make it exactly the same way. As long as the end result hits all the right notes, the path to get there is up to the chef. Some of it comes down to personal preference, but it's also all about the availability of ingredients or what might be in season or native to one specific place. But it's a bit like pad kapow, which we just covered last week. For every ingredient you add, you need to adjust everything else to make sure the finished product still achieves a perfect balance of flavor, texture, and in this case, color. This is a restaurant we've been to before on the channel. It's part of a small southern Thai community on the Thonburi side of the river. And here, the 3 or 4 places that serve this dish represent probably half of all the Khao Yam in Bangkok. Even between neighbors, there are slight differences in components and proportions. Next door, there's another version, a bit less sweet, a touch heavier on coconut and lemongrass, made here from a family recipe for more than 40 years. And it was so good that even though we had more places to film, I ate 2 plates myself, then took a 3rd one to go back home. I mean, again, this stuff is gold. If you find it outside of southern Thailand, you take advantage. In the south of Thailand, or Bangkok's small southern Thai community, Khao Yam is a breakfast food, a light and healthy meal eaten by itself or with some roti and a fried egg, something that in the provinces along the Malay border is found almost everywhere. But unlike some other southern foods, this is not well known in Bangkok. Some of that might simply come down to luck. There's not always a rhyme or reason about what dishes spread and catch on. But there is a more fundamental reason why this is so hard to find outside of one part of the world. And that's because it's kind of a nightmare dish for a restaurant owner when you consider it typically sells for less than $1 a plate. Every component takes time to prepare. You have to find the freshest stuff every single day for the raw components. The coconut has to be toasted or dried or ground to a powder. The chili crushed or mixed fresh with vinegar. Even the rice might be traditionally made by cooking it with blue butterfly pea for a striking color and subtle flavor. But the real challenge comes from the one element all Khao Yam dishes share in common: the sauce. You can't just slap some Thousand Island on and call it a Khao Yam. Here, the dressing is something talked about in almost religious fervor among those who make this dish. It's intense and flavorful and takes as much as a full year to prepare one batch. That's a sauce called Nam Budu. Now, Nam Budu is one of those things that might sound aggressive or worse to someone unfamiliar with this kind of technique, but it's an ingredient whose depth of flavor is absolutely essential to rounding out the taste of Khao Yam. Put simply, it's ocean fish, today mostly anchovies, layered with salt and placed in an airtight enclosure, then sealed and allowed to ferment for between 8 months and 1 full year. The idea of fermenting fish over such a long period of time is not unique to Southeast Asia. It's also a key technique used in Scandinavia and northern countries like Iceland. It's something that was at one point an essential method of preservation, but it also creates a flavor that itself lends a unique component to a dish. And when it comes to Nam Budu, the final product is then combined with palm sugar and sometimes with things like lemongrass, galangal, and onion, and cooked down into a thick sauce. It's time-consuming, labor-intensive, and unless it's a family tradition, it's probably not something the average restaurant will take the time or effort to make, especially for a dish typically sold for less than a cup of 7-Eleven coffee. It's hard to imagine anything that takes as much work for as little profit. In fact, the only people who do make it these days in Bangkok view this entirely as a labor of love. This is Alex, and he owns and operates one of the very few authentic Southern Thai breakfast counters in Bangkok. Every day he's up before 3 in the morning to prepare the dishes for that day's service, or to start the process for the longer prep foods that he'll serve 24 hours later. His restaurant opens at 5:30 before the sunrise, serving Southern curries, coffee, and of course, his famous specialty.
I was working like a graphic designer before.
Okay.
That's the thing. And that's why I turned around. I complete my educate from Sydney University, okay, graphic, right? And I went to America for 11 years, altogether 20 years, some this time. And I come back, and I work for few years, and I decide to quit. When I see my mom is the last generation for this kind of food. No more after this. And I got one sister, younger sister, one younger brother, and both of them not interested in this kind of field. So I decided to quit my official job and to save, to keep this. You know, if comparing the salary, it different.
Yeah.
You know,
I know.
obviously.
Yeah.
But I want to keep it because I love my grandma, I love my mom, and I want to save this kind of recipe for the new generation if they want to.
Alright, before this video takes a turn, I'm gonna lay out the broad strokes of the history of Khao Yam. In this case, it's not just a fun bit of trivia, it's actually really important for the rest of this video. This is the area where it's most likely that Khao Yam comes from. It's a region that includes the southern Thai provinces of Pattani, Yala, and Narathiwat, the region closest to the Malay border. But you'll notice that that's not the only part of the map circled. There's also an area to the south, a part of present-day Malaysia known as Kelantan. Taken as a whole, this cluster has seen settlement since at least as far back as the 2nd century AD. But where we really start to focus on this area in terms of the roots of modern cuisine begins around the year 1400 with the establishment of the Pattani Kingdom. Now, this is known in history as a Malay state, but it's not quite that simple. There are multiple origin stories of the kingdom, including a popular one that credits a local fisherman, but the most credible story says that the founder was a Siamese prince, something that would make sense as the area had been a tributary of Sukhothai and later Ayutthaya. The kingdom also did not include Kelantan in the early days either. It was primarily based in what's now, of course, known as Pattani. Either way, the first Pattani king would convert to Islam and establish his own sultanate, which would, after the fall of Malacca to the Portuguese in 1511, become perhaps the most important Islamic center on the Malay Peninsula. As trade grew from Muslim empires like Persia and parts of India, commerce expanded and Pattani became a melting pot where the local Malays were joined by vast numbers of Chinese, Siamese, English, Portuguese, and Dutch, and most importantly, the Muslim Javanese, who formed a close trading relationship with Pattani after converting to Islam in the late 16th century. The roots of Khao Yam most likely arrived through those Javanese. There, the tradition of mixing rice with raw vegetables and spices is best known in a dish called nasi ulam. That's known as a Banten dish, the empire that ruled South Java until the early 1800s. Anyway, more on that in a minute. To quickly wrap up the story of Pattani, control of the kingdom, which now included the Malay state of Kelantan, would pinball back and forth between the Pattani, the Kelantanese, and the Siamese for pretty much the next 300 years. I mean, seriously, it was basically non-stop war and intrigue, and it's a pretty wild part of history that, unfortunately, we don't really have time to cover. But ultimately, in the end, the kingdom would be annexed into Siam in 1902, and then in 1909, the old Kelantan territory was ceded to Malaysia and the British colonial rulers. The territory would be forever split in two. Okay, so I want to take a minute and talk about one of the existential problems with something like food history. Khao Yam has roots in a kingdom that now belongs to two countries. Both of those countries claim this as their own endemic dish. In Malaysia, by the way, it's called Nasi Kerabu. But people get really emotional about this stuff. Everyone wants to say that a dish is theirs, instead of understanding how complicated history can actually be. Yours and theirs probably didn't exist when something first showed up, at least not with the same borders that we see today. Tons of dishes all around the world, and certainly here in Thailand, evolved over centuries in these nebulous border regions that might have a shared ethnic ancestry, but through the years have paid their taxes to a lot of different kings and kingdoms. There's stuff like beef rendang, something claimed by Malaysia, but it's unequivocally from Sumatra. But it's not that simple, because for much of ancient history, Sumatra and the Malay Peninsula were part of the same empire. Here's a hypothetical. What if a dish first emerged in a territory that's now part of Thailand, but that territory used to be part of Lao kingdoms? Now, what if the dish itself was developed in a Lao kingdom that's now part of Thailand by cooks who were ethnic Chinese using Chinese techniques and ingredients? Would that dish be rightly considered Thai, Lao, or Chinese? I guess that's not really a hypothetical, because that's more or less the case with Khao Yam. Because that brings us to nasi ulam, the dish of the Javanese. It's got the same technique, the same basic idea, and it almost definitely plays some part in the history of the dish today. But that doesn't mean that we can say that Khao Yam is Javanese, because even though the techniques are similar, it tastes completely different. So that brings up another point. How do we even define a dish at all? Do we start with the earliest possible ancestor? Or do we only count from when something looked identical to how it looks today? And if it can be a little bit different but still count, well, how different can we go? I've had arguments before about a sandwich. Is a burger a sandwich? It has two pieces of bread with fillings in the middle. What about a pita? How about a dumpling? What is the single characteristic that makes a dish something and not something else? And this is where you start to see real conflict, because if you don't take the time to understand the nuance of how and when, not just where something developed, you end up ignoring the magic and how the world's best cuisines actually got that way, through the mixing and connecting and conquering of a never-ending series of cultures, unique and fascinating and worth remembering. It's why we feel like this stuff is important for us to record, even if the answers don't always make everyone happy. What you can't do is simply plant your flag and say, mine. Now, there's a lot of reasons why countries or their citizens today want to claim dishes as their own. There's pride and heritage. There's rivalry between neighbors. There's also tourism, because it's big business today to say that something is the true home of a dish that's now beloved around the world. But the truth is, there's no room for nationalism in food. Food is something that more than anything else shows how interconnected we all really are. Because when food and nationalism do collide, you might end up with consequences as dire as what happened at the intersection of Khao Yam and Nasi Kerabu.
I like Nasi Kerabu. Nasi Kerabu is one of my favorite dishes, actually.
This is Zan Azli. He's a Malaysian documentary filmmaker and journalist. In the late 1990s and early 2000s, tensions flared along the Thai-Malay border in the territory of the old Patani Empire, as ethnic Malay Muslims on the Thai side of the line formed separatist groups and demanded independence. Incredibly, Khao Yam, or Nasi Kerabu, that old Patani dish, became something of a flashpoint in the conflict, a symbol of ethnic identity, even though it was one that happens to be claimed by both sides. In 2006, Zan spent a few months covering the violent protests. His book would be titled Operation Nasi Kerabu.
It was never the intention to write about Nasi Kerabu. I went there to shoot a documentary about the conflict that was happening in southern Thailand, in Patani, and Golo and Narathiwat, the southern region of Thailand, where there are a lot of, most people would know, a lot of, it's a Muslim region, Malay, but they're Thais, of course. I think the history goes way back when the state of Kelantan encompassed the southern Thailand region as well. And with all the colonials, the colonists and all that, they break up the borders of our world. They come over to this place and they break up our borders, and hence Patani and Kelantan were separated.
The reason food entered this story is that for the Malay people in the southern provinces, Nasi Kerabu was almost a symbol, something eaten in almost every home and considered a local hallmark of Malay identity.
It's almost the same. Actually, it's 99% the same, right? The Nasi Kerabu there and the Nasi Kerabu in Kelantan and Terengganu. So, as you know, the people in southern Thailand, they identify themselves as Malay, Malay Muslims. So I guess food is quite important for their identity as well, and they see it being very similar to the Malays in Malaysia as well. And they look at the Malays in Kelantan, they look at the Malays in Terengganu, they're eating Nasi Kerabu as well. So yeah, I guess it's a similarity there that I guess it makes them feel like there's a certain kinship between them and Malays over here. Yeah.
Can you give me just a little bit of a synopsis? If you were giving a quick synopsis of your book as it was written, and then the state as far as you're aware of the border regions today.
The sentiments have changed. They don't necessarily want to gain independence anymore, but they do want to have a little bit more autonomy. They do want to have a little bit more freedom in practicing their culture and their religion, and they want the Thai government to acknowledge the fact that they're different, right? You see, that's the thing. They don't mind being Thai. They no longer want to become their own nation. They're okay to be Thais, but they want to be known as Thai Malays. Right? They're proud to be Thai. So when the Olympic comes about, they're going to support, they're going to root for the Thai athlete, you know. If ever Thailand were to make the World Cup in football, they'll probably be supporting Thailand rather than Malaysia or wanting a Patani team in the World Cup or whatever. So I think the sentiments have changed to that now.
But even though tensions have cooled along the border, now there's a new challenge to Thai-Malay relationships, and that's the idea of a growing awareness of this one dish in the outside world. With the only question being, will everybody one day discover the magic of Khao Yam or the magic of Nasi Kerabu? Two names for the same thing.
The thing about Malaysia tends to try to claim everything as theirs. So I guess if you look at, let's take Nasi Kerabu for example, right? The people in southern Thailand eat Nasi Kerabu, they cook Nasi Kerabu, and let's say if Nasi Kerabu becomes something really popular in Thailand and it starts spreading across the nation, right? And everybody starts eating Nasi Kerabu, I'm going to bet you that Malaysians will say, oh, look at that, it's a Malaysian dish. Malaysia, we did it. It's not just nasi lemak now, it's even Nasi Kerabu, you know? Even though for the Thais, they will see it as something that's originating from the south of their own country.
This one is Nasi Kerabu in Malaysia and Malayu in Indo called to all Nasi Kerabu and Thai Khao Yam.
Sometimes a story you're telling feels distant and far away and all of a sudden just hits right at home. This is Nice, and she's a Thai-Malay cook who learned how to make Khao Yam, or Nasi Kerabu, from her family in her hometown in Yala province, part of the old kingdoms of Patani and Kelantan. And it's not just her recipe that she got from her parents. She even manages to be perhaps the only restaurant in all of Bangkok that serves Budu sauce, made with a full 12-month fermentation method. And that's because, well, her mom sends it to her.
คุณแม่เป็นคนทำน้ำบูดูค่ะแล้วก็ส่งมาให้ค่ะเพราะว่าเดิมเป็นคนทำน้ำบูดูอยู่ที่จังหวัดยะลาอยู่แล้วค่ะใช่ก็ขายมาแล้ว20 ปีค่ะใช่แล้วก็อันนี้ก็เป็นรุ่นของลูกที่ขายข้าวค่ะอันดับแรกเราต้องราดน้ำบูดูเข้าไปก่อนนะคะอันนี้เราต้องกะปริมาณให้ได้นะคะเพราะบางทีน้ำบูดูมันจะเค็มค่ะแล้วก็อันนี้จะเป็นปลาป่นค่ะเราใส่ประมาณ1 ช้อนครึ่งค่ะต่อข้าว1 ถ้วยค่ะต่อไปจะเป็นมะพร้าวนะคะมะพร้าวคั่วเราจะใส่แค่นิดเดียวนะคะเพราะว่าไม่งั้นพอเรากินเข้าไปแล้วมันจะแห้งเกินไปต่อไปอันนี้จะเป็น พริกน้ำส้มค่ะ อันนี้จะเป็นไฮไลท์เลย ถ้าไม่มีก็คือแบบรสชาติมันจะไม่กลมกล่อมค่ะ ต่อด้วยผักนะคะ อันนี้จะเป็นผักกะหล่ำปีสีม่วงค่ะ สามารถเลือกใช้ได้เลยนะคะว่าอยากจะใส่ผักอะไรบ้าง แต่ทางร้านเลือกที่จะใส่ผักสมุนไพรที่มีประโยชน์ให้กับลูกค้าค่ะ ร้านเราจะเป็นข้าวยำที่จะมีผักอย่างน้อยจะต้อง6ชนิดนะคะ สุดท้ายแครอทค่ะเพิ่มสีสันให้กับจานของคุณ เสร็จแล้วค่ะ
Niece opened her restaurant in front of a well-known mosque on a street called Phetchaburi Soi 7 here in Bangkok. Here you can find the heart of the city's Thai-Malay community. It's the only part of town where Khao Yam or Nasi Kerabu is sold as street food, a place that feels like nowhere else in downtown Bangkok. But where a generation ago we might have found tension or mistrust, now the young people take pride in having more than one identity. And like Zanazli found Nasi Kerabu symbolic of the breakaway rebellions, here we might be able to see the same dish as a symbol of progress and understanding.
Thai people say this is Thai dish.
Yeah.
Malaysian people say this is Malay dish.
Yeah.
What do you say?
อ๋อคิดว่าอะไรใช่ไหมactually คิดว่ามาเลเซียด้วยความที่พื้นที่เราอยู่ติดกันนะคะใช่พื้นที่เราอยู่ติดกันจริงๆแล้วข้าวยำก็มาจากประเทศไทยนะคะแต่ว่าอยู่ทางตอนใต้ของประเทศไทยด้วยความที่ติดกับประเทศมาเลเซียค่ะ
Here's the thing about food. The reason these topics bring out so much emotion is because at the end of the day, this stuff is deeply personal. It's not just about the food itself. It's about what it means to us.
My parents and father and mother have a restaurant for breakfast and a little I remember กินข้าวยำ every day ในทุกๆวันก็จะกินข้าวยำค่ะ
How would you eat Khao Yam when you were growing up?
With my grandma and my it kind of family evening dinner, that's it. Or special lunch someday for the family, like a reunion or something like that.
ก็ของใต้ก็ของไทยนะคะแต่อยู่ทางภาคใต้ เพราะว่าเราเกิดมาเราก็ทานข้าวยำตั้งแต่เด็กๆแล้วก็นึกว่าเป็นของประเทศไทยแล้วก็
To me, this is a perfect dish. It's literally, it's my favorite food. What else are you gonna say?
Subscribe to the channel for more from OTR. Thank you so much to everyone who supports us on Patreon. It's a huge help to keep us going. Follow us on Instagram and Facebook in the links below.